is Making Stitches, and this time my guest is Murron Fraser, a textiles artist who's encouraging us all to reconnect with our imaginations, exploring nature, folklore and storytelling through textiles.
One of the key things really I want to do is spark glimmers, which are pocket-sized amounts of joy. And scientifically, they're proven over time when you accumulate all these little glimmers to have a positive impact on your well-being. So it's a very holistic approach. I would like people to feel I'm giving them permission to play, but at the same time walking away feeling like they've learned something new that they can carry on with, or they've experienced a really nice session where they felt inspired. Or actually give them a skill building approach where they're learning and being creative, but at the same time at the end it has got some sort of transformative quality where they've actually grown in confidence or grown in skill set.
Hello and welcome to Making Stitches podcast. I'm Lindsay. I've loved making things for as long as I can remember. I learned to sew, knit and crochet as a child, and the love of making has stayed with me all my life. As an adult, I worked as a journalist for a while and discovered a love of hearing people's stories too. More recently, Making Stitches podcast was born during the long days of lockdown, allowing me to join two of my passions, creativity and conversation. This time, my guest is Murron Fraser, a contemporary textiles artist based in Manchester. Murron's work is inspired by nature, folklore and storytelling, creating richly layered textile pieces that invite us to look more closely at the hidden wonders of the natural world. Through a combination of printmaking, machine embroidery, applique and other techniques, she creates artworks that are full of texture, colour and meaning. Alongside her artistic practice, Murron is also a passionate educator and workshop facilitator, helping others reconnect with their creativity through community projects and courses. In our conversation, we talk about the threads that run through her work, from Celtic folklore and the idea of hidden worlds, to the role of observation and curiosity, and being playful. We also discuss why slowing down and taking time to be creative is so very important.
A textile artist, a contemporary textile artist, and that really sees me exploring lots of different techniques and processes. So some of the areas that I tend to focus more on are things like machine embroidery. I do a lot of printmaking as well, hand applied processes, and the list goes on really. I'm quite multimedia in the way I approach creating textiles. And my pieces, I like to kind of imagine them as a portal. The purpose behind them really is to spark glimmers and give people a new perspective on the world around us. And I do that through looking at nature and folklore stories and kind of this idea of just because you can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I've brought in things like natural phenomenons within nature, like scientific phenomenons such as biofluorescence, to kind of pull that out a bit more, these hidden worlds that are within nature. And that's kind of where things kind of snowballed, and it's really grown into this research body of work that's continually building. And I like to kind of describe that as rhizomatic, where there's not a start point or an end point, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's not a very linear way of building and researching and discovering new things. It kind of inspires each other. So that's really, in terms of my creative practice, where that kind of takes me. And then alongside that, I'm also a teacher, and I've worked in formal education and community arts, and it sees me these days more working within community arts and also running my own workshops as a creative, because I'm really passionate about supporting people finding their creativity. I truly believe everyone's creative, even though they tell me all the time they're not. And I think it's just what it can bring to you. So as part of my MA that I did, and looked a lot into kind of the creative health side of things and how that can be so beneficial to our well-being. And that really is underpinning a lot of what I do. It's all about you reconnecting with your imagination and finding your creative voice, because I believe everybody's got their own creative DNA, and having the time and the permission to play, I think, is sometimes the biggest thing that stops people, especially as adults, when life's so busy and you don't really get the chance to use your imagination, slow down, reconnect with your creativity. What I do is all about giving you that permission and guiding you along the way. So through that, I have my online seasonal stitch circle, which is kind of a community that I'm building to invite people to come into this world that I'm trying to create, and give you that permission to reconnect with your wild imagination as well.
That is so important. I've just been talking to some friends actually recently about the fact that I've got this list of things that I really want to do in crochet, but
Yeah.
every time I think, right, I'll do it, I've got half a day off work or something like that, I'll sit down, I'll do it, and then all of a sudden I think, well, actually the grass needs cutting, the kitchen needs cleaning, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden those creative moments that you're looking forward to, it's really hard to sort of box off that time and give yourself permission without feeling guilty, because there's always jobs to do, isn't there? But that,
Yeah.
actually giving yourself permission to do it is yeah, very, very important, and I completely identify with that.
I think it is true though. I think it becomes like lower down on the list. It's not seen to be as important, but I think sometimes, like when you look at the bigger picture of it all, what it can actually do for your well-being, which then can help you in all the other day-to-day areas. I think when you start to consider it that way, then that's when the value's added even more. But yeah, I totally get it. I think as adults, like, we're kind of told that we're not allowed to be playful, we're not allowed to use our imaginations and creativity. It's not deemed to be important. Where when you think of kids and children, it's encouraged all the time. Play this, have a go at this, imagine this, and I think it gets lost somewhere along the way. And my mission's to bring it back, because it's true. You say I experience it myself, and I'm an artist. I think sometimes your day to day, just the rat race of life, takes over a lot of the time. And sometimes that's just not, that's not through choice, that's just life, isn't it? But I think making that purposeful time, just even if it's 10-20 minutes, actually can be transformative in the long run. Not only, finding your creativity and you exploring that, but also kind of the well-being side of it and what it can do for you, just to slow your nervous system down really, and give you that creative pause, if anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. So can I take you back to being young Murron as a child? Presumably, maybe I'm jumping to conclusions here, but presumably you've always been creative to have followed this career path.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's never a moment when I was younger where I weren't doing something creative. And that wasn't always art. Like, I used to imagine and play games and things with my friends when I was younger, and always like wanting to make stuff and be arty. And I used to make cards. There was always something that I was doing, and I just loved it. It was just what my interests like were really. And then that saw me take that into obviously education, and I was started to learn about all these different techniques and processes that existed, and grew my knowledge of art in general. And then I always remember I got to do a foundation course. So I did my A levels, and then foundation course was the in between going to uni and finishing my A levels. And that year, I think, was how I ended up doing textiles, to be honest. They just gave us that permission to play. You got to experiment with so many different techniques and processes and find your own thing, and you were allowed to be creative. And I think in that moment, and chatting to my tutors who were really supportive and everything, I didn't really consider textiles. I think I had the view of maybe what most people do, which is just dressmaking. And actually, textiles is just an umbrella term for this vast, huge area of this discipline that incorporates so many different things. And it's really innovative as well. It can be from surface design, which I've got a background in, things like wallpaper, greeting cards, fashion prints, even like creating fashion as well. You've also got things like your contemporary textiles, knitting, crochet. I mean, the list goes on really. It's huge. And I didn't really know about that. I knew bits of it, I knew some of the techniques, but how big the industry actually is. and how many opportunities and how they overlap so much. And I think it really opened my eyes, and it was more not so much like learn about the industry, but learn about the way I created. So very much a maximalist. And more is more, even though I try not to. It just is the way I create. It's that creative identity, that DNA. And yeah, I always remember, like, I love a sketchbook and the way I used to layer my pages and clip things in and just printing and placement of things, and the ideas that I used to have and the way that I then created that into pieces of artwork would typically fall within the textile remit. And I always remember using the sewing machines for the first time and using them in a creative way, maybe not what they were supposed to be for, and we were allowed to just draw with these machines, and it just unlocked this whole world for me, and I never really realised how exciting it can be. And I think that sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole, because when I was going to go to university, I'd applied for like graphic design courses, and I was all set to go and do graphic design, and this kind of experimentation that was happening alongside going to, you know, these fairs that universities do. I just remember going to one, and then I was walking through the hall, and I just saw this stand, and it was just like textiles and wallpapers and prints, and I just remember looking at it thinking, wow, like, I want to do that, and that feels like me. And that moment actually has been the pinnacle point, because if I hadn't have seen that and I hadn't really thought about the techniques I was using and how I actually created my work, maybe I would have been a graphic designer, who knows. But it's actually then led me on to, you know, going into university, doing a degree and a master's in it. But even though I did that, I feel that you can still find your creativity and your thing just through the experimentation of it. And I think that's then led me to where I am today.
Fantastic. Well, do you know, it's serendipity sometimes, isn't it, that we take the path that we do. And thank goodness for those chance moments that steer us to where we're supposed to be in life.
Yeah, and I think, you know, sometimes like just taking the time to notice, because I always say, like, everybody has like an inbuilt colour palette, you're drawn to certain things, and that is your creativity, even though you're not actually making anything, those elements are part of your creativity in a way. And I think because I did take that time to sort of notice how I create, how I put things together, what materials and processes I was drawn to, I think that allowed me to understand who I was as a creative, even though it was really early on. Just then, you know, it allowed me to understand that. And I think if I hadn't have done that and just gone along the route of, oh, that's the next step, or that's the job, or I don't think maybe I would have been as authentic to myself. So I think it is important to do that. But yeah, it's true what you say. Everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely, absolutely. So would you like to talk me through a little bit of what you actually are doing at the moment, what as far as your practice is concerned?
Yeah, so I've been exploring this body of work called Hidden Worlds, and as I was saying earlier, it's all about kind of exploring the hidden parts of nature. And this has been underpinned by folklore stories. So this is another story really that links into what we were just talking about. So when I've looked back over my work, after I did my degree, I worked in like heritage projects, I developed my own product line collections, always been inspired by nature, and I did lots of different things. And then when I came to do my masters, I really sat down and had that moment again where I thought about everything. I reflected on my practice and I reflected on my creative identity in a way. And I really noticed that there's three key things that stood out. That was nature, I was very much drawn to that. The kind of storytelling part of things, I'd always been drawn to like narratives and kind of bringing in stories within my work. And then the final thing was heritage. So I'd worked on my heritage projects and bringing archives back to life. And then three things that kind of underpinned everything, even quite early on. They were like the flavour of them was in my work. So I decided to kind of focus on those three things. And at the time, my family were doing a family tree, and I knew I was Scottish, but I didn't realise how Irish I was. And I come for these like creative Celtic civilizations, and that really inspired me because I knew there was so much folklore entrenched in these civilizations. So that led to me researching it even more. And when I did, I found that they're all underpinned by nature. they look to nature, the stories are about nature, the characters that are within these stories, like the fairies and the elves and so on, were all entrenched in nature. And I thought, this is just a really natural link here. I've stumbled upon this in a way, or my work's drawn me to this point. And then the heritage side of things came from kind of looking at the archives and how entrenched they were in these communities. Because if you really think about it, at the time when folklore was the most prevalent, there wasn't science, there wasn't emergency services. And as humans, we have this innate ability to storytell, and we need to understand. And folklore basically does that. It allows us to learn about the world around us. So this led me to research this even more. And alongside this, I'd looked at creative health. This sort of came through like the teaching side of my practice over the years, and I'm really passionate about the holistic approach to helping people with like their own creativity and how that can benefit well-being. So alongside that, I looked at that, and they just married up. Everything kind of married up, and I think that then started the ball rolling really. So like I say, I looked at hidden worlds, and maybe as adults again, we see a tree, we see a plant, we don't really slow down, see the finer details. And it encouraged me to do that through this research that I was doing. And through each season, new parts of nature unlocked, new parts of nature revealed as the seasons change. And with that came folklore stories. So nature almost became my archive and a way of finding these stories out and discovering new parts of the world around me. So that then got translated into my own work, which then I kind of made into my own through the way I layered how I put the narratives together and what the pieces were about. So then that's then led to more inspiration and more stories and more lines of inquiry, which is this never-ending development of this research. So this is kind of like, I say in a nutshell, that's quite a long-winded way of saying it, but it kind of gives you a flavour of where my work's taken me. And again, it's just sort of one of those things that have naturally kind of developed, and it's through that reflection and through allowing the time to notice that I've been able to draw on these elements and bring it into what my work is about today.
Fantastic. Now, obviously this is an audio podcast, so other than looking at your website and social media, people won't be able to see what you do. But can you describe to somebody who's listening, what your work looks like?
Yes, I can. So it's very maximalist. Imagine very multi-layered pieces that are rich in colour and texture. I like to use kind of printmaking, so that's sometimes painting by hand and then printing onto textiles. It could be photographs printed onto textiles, and it even could be kind of layering textures as well to create a ground that already has a lot there. Over the top of that, I then build, so I have things like applique, I make my own embellishments to create this really lovely layered textural quality, and then over the top of that, I work into it with the sewing machine, so I use it like my paintbrush essentially. I kind of add in the detail, I sometimes add text or write onto the pieces, and then I try to incorporate elements that are interactive and kind of show this hidden part of the world around us. So through that, I've used UV reactive pigments and dyes and threads, which when a UV torch is on it, reveals this hidden part of the world. So the goal really is each piece is almost like a little mini portal or a part of a story, which there's lots more to tell. So yeah, that's kind of, hopefully that's painted a nice picture in the listeners' imaginations of what my work looks like. Each piece as well has a lot of symbolism within it. So I'm not just creating images and pictures and drawings as well as textile work of just things that I see. Sometimes within them are elements that have that symbolic meaning, so stuff like mushrooms, I put in like fairy circles. It could be bits of text, it could be particular flowers linked with symbols that are in the Celtic calendar. So there's lots of different elements that are building this narrative that the pieces are about. And some people have asked me before, like, is it really important that the viewer understands the piece straight away, or do you have to explain it to them? And I think for me, it's sort of in two parts really. when people look at it, they're naturally drawn because it's nature. We can all relate to nature, and we can kind of relate to folklore as well because they belong to everybody. And so people are interpreting that through their own understanding of the world around them. But then when these hidden elements are there, and then I share that with people, that moment's then sparking a new perspective, and it's allowing you to see that detail and this sort of hidden part of nature that maybe we wouldn't have seen straight away. So hopefully that paints a bit of a picture of what the pieces look like. Of course, like I have some work on my website and things like that, and social media that people can go and look at. But yeah, that's kind of what it's about.
Well, that's brilliant. Yeah, but having seen some of it myself, you're right. There is so many layers to it. It's so intricate, and it looks at some. The bigger picture is just beautiful and colourful and everything, and then you focus in on the details and you see so much more. It's not just an immediate thing, is it? If you actually concentrate it and go deeper, you can see so much more.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say, and I'm glad that you feel like that because that's really my aim. I will show you some pieces, and if people are listening, they can go and look at these pieces on my website. But some of them have, like I was saying before, photographs, and then I use text and the folklore basically about the things that I'm exploring within the piece almost as texture. So I'll write it quite small on the sewing machine using free machine embroidery. So it kind of looks a bit like moss, for example. And then over the top of that, I'll like layer my own embellishments or pieces that I've made and applique them on. So again, it kind of goes back to the way that I used to work in a sketchbook and continue to work in a sketchbook, kind of layering all these pieces together and building the story and building a narrative. I'm not trying to put a jigsaw back together. I'm building my own interpretation of it. So I think that's just the way I naturally create, and through that, it's allowed me to build these mini portals, if you like, that share these narratives.
Fabulous. Yes, I'd love to see some of your work.
Yeah, I'll show you some. So, as you'll see here, and those who are listening, I make my own sketchbooks. So these are using all my own textile samples and printmaking, which I then layer up to create pages. So on this page that we're looking at currently, it's inspired by multiple bits of folklore. So I've got some embellished details here that are hawthorn flowers. So the hawthorn tree is very prevalent within folklore. It is known as the fairy tree, and the flowers are really beautiful but don't smell very nice. But they have got a lot of folklore around the flowers as well. So they're deemed to be bad luck if you bring them inside. It can sort of bring bad fortune. So again, just a simple flower that maybe we just would have overlooked on our day to day captures so much folklore. We've also got the elderflower, so this links into Norse folklore as well. And the in Norse folklore, you must ask the elder mother who lives in the elder tree permission to take from the tree, otherwise she'll haunt you.
Oh my word!
So, don't do it, everybody. But and they seem quite funny, these stories, but again, it's that idea of respecting nature and not taking what's not yours, and kind of making sure that you don't see nature as just your resource. It's the world, basically. Nature's not there just to be taken from.
Absolutely.
So they have this underpinning moral to the story, if you like. And then this idea is continued. So again, here we've got some appliqued mushrooms, which when the UV light is on them, it reacts and glows. So that idea of the biofluorescence, which is a real thing, and mushrooms do react in that way. And then we have here some images of little birds. So the mushrooms and the birds are related to elves within Norse folklore. So if you see circles of mushrooms, it's believed to either be a fairy or an elf circle. And the elves are prominently out in the morning mist and twilight, and they sing. And if you hear them singing, you might hear them above the bird song. So again, these elements are all put together which look nature based, but every single thing pretty much has that meaning and that symbolism within it. So it's telling a story. So I create these sketchbooks as a way of understanding and getting my ideas out. Something visual that I can come back to. It's almost like building my own archive in a way and recording this imagery. I looked at things such as weather law, which is on another page in the sketchbook, where if you notice nature and notice how maybe the birds are flying, so this particular piece says if the swallows are flying low in wet weather, it means that that's approaching, so the wet weather's approaching. And then you've got things like kind of the different times of the day, how the folklore relates to that. So there's literally everything in your world around you in nature has some sort of folkloric tale attached to it or meaning behind it, and it's just waiting to be discovered, and I find that really exciting. These pieces here are again looking at kind of the elderflower tree. So that I created this by creating a printed background using my own drawing and painting, and then I make my own embellishments, which are then layered up with applique pieces that I've quilted as well. I like to incorporate text, so sometimes like I'll stitch that in, and other times maybe I'll print that. And it's just a way of me finding and understanding these stories and ideas. And these pages, I mean, the sketchbook on its own, like that, and it's its own thing in its own right, but at the same time, it can be used for inspiration, and it might be that the way I've placed stuff or the stories that I've put together actually inspire a bigger piece, for example. So they're the sketchbook. And then, as well as that, I like to create smaller samples and bigger samples. So don't have really a set size that I create my work to. It varies depending on what it is I'm doing. So I've got a piece here that's got all the Celtic symbols from the Wheel of the Year and the different festivals. So we've just had Beltane not long ago, which is believed to be the thinnest point of the year, in addition to Samhain, which is Halloween. And it's believed to be the thinnest point between our world and the other world, so the kind of fairy world and the human world, and that idea of this crossover and things happening. So this is celebrated within the Celtic calendar, and it all falls with seasons, and it all falls with kind of the changing of the seasons as well. Again, we've got the hawthorn flower here, so they can see how out the sketchbook this is inspired a little piece. All these are pretty much on my website. You can go and take a look if you are listening as well. Florals are a big inspiration to me, so I go on walks, I look what's around me, I take photographs, and that in itself is inspiration. But then from there, I'll then research the folklore. So I went in spring and there was so many crocuses out, and these are a sign of renewal and new life, obviously because spring is all about that, and hope as well. So these pieces were hand painted, printed onto textiles like fabric, which I've then gone over the top of with the machine and layered and embroidered. And these crocuses sit on top of a quilted background that then captures things like the leaves and the patterns and textures that I saw with the crocuses. And it doesn't really fall within a square. The crocuses kind of spread out over the background fabric to create this tactile quality, and the focus is drawn to those florals. So I do play around a lot with how I actually create things and how they're layered. I've got a piece here looking at all different types of mushrooms. So I'll create pieces as well where I'll research into something in particular, and then I use the textiles, like the fabric, as almost like a sketchbook page. So I've created lots of different mushrooms. Some of these are inspired by real mushrooms, some are through my own creative license and being experimental. And then over the top of that, I've embroidered into them. I've built little kind of connecting vines, almost kind of replicating that idea of mycelium structures. And then in the background, I've actually used a sewing machine to write folklore about mushrooms. So like a symbol of enlightenment, kind of a good luck symbol as well, and how they're connected to some of the folklore characters. So it tells you a bit about the mushroom in a way that's visual. So that's kind of a part and parcel of my process as well. Again, looking at folklore out of the archives. So I've got a little piece here where I've just added text about a story about Fairy and a Robin as a way of recording that and inspiring more pieces. I like to work in circles, I like to work in hoops, I like to work in squares. There's no set way of me creating, but I'm not very, very precise. I like some of the loose threads. I like the tactile quality. So I've got another piece developed from the mushrooms here where I've created a fairy circle, so a group of mushrooms. They're very vibrant, they've got a lot of texture and colour in there. In the background I've got some Celtic symbols, and then over the top of that I've created some mossy elements with hand applied processes with lots of loose threads to give you that tactile feel, and again kind of emulate the mycelium structures of how they connect and communicate with each other. So there's a lot of symbolism again, like I say, in these pieces, but again, my work kind of has its own way of creating. I'm very intuitive. I never really know what it's going to look like till it's made.
Almost
So
like nature itself. It's just kind of evolves.
Absolutely, and I think that's a big inspiration for me. Like when creating and making compositions, I look to nature and think about how it grows. Nature doesn't always grow in a linear way, things overlap, things are set back, things are kind of going in a curvy shape. So I look at that and use that as inspiration for creating compositions as well. And having that tactile quality, I think, is a big thing. Not only is that just part of my style, but looking at nature in particular, you know, all the textures that you see, the shapes, the colours, is very tactile and textural. And as humans, green is the colour we see the most shades of. So if you just even think of a forest, just green, no flowers at all, how much richness and tactile qualities you can visually see just in a forest, for example. So I use that to kind of inspire, and also looking at things at different scales and perspectives, you know, really close up or set back or like an aerial shot, for example. Those three different views will give you three different outcomes. So I think just again, it's that reflection as well. And then, as well as looking at plants and flowers and habitats, I also look at creatures that inhabit these pieces, these environments. So this piece here is a piece of an image of a heron, which I've painted and then layered up and appliqued with lots of different plants and structures, and then worked over the top of that with machine embroidery. So the heron I saw when I went for a walk, he was sat by a lake, and very like majestic birds and looked very prehistoric, I think. And when I researched into herons, they're actually very much connected to folklore. So they're believed to be a guardian of this world and the water world, and like they're very much connected to the other world, which is like the fairy realm as well. So it was rich in folklore. So again, there's like symbolism in these pieces. And I tend to work in collections, not necessarily with a number in mind, but the pieces are all sort of taught to each other, and I like to present them as series or layered elements so that when you look at it, it does feel like one big body of work, but at the same time, that individual pieces in their own right as well. So that kind of gives you a bit of an overview as well of kind of my thinking and creative process. This piece here is also on my website, so this explores kind of building a hidden world, and it has some photographs in the background that I took when I went to the forest. So there was like some mushrooms growing, there was these kind of mossy stones, which is a sign of a troll's house. I was so excited when I found it. And then I've overlaid that with really heavy stitch using machine embroidery, hand applied processes, applique. I've got some trapunto, which is like a 3D form of applique, to build this habitat so that again it draws you in. There's lots to see, but it has that symbolism as well. And this piece is actually UV reactive as well, so when the UV light is shone on it, it really reveals this hidden aspect underneath.
Oh yes, that's incredible. It just kind of jumps off, doesn't it? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's so bright in here today. I maybe close my blind slightly, you'll be able to see it. Um, the camera don't really pick it up as well as your eyes do, but it kind of reveals this hidden world. So you can see in this section here, I'm just shining a UV light onto my work at the minute, and I've stitched with UV reactive threads, which talk about the mushrooms, but I've done it so close together that you can't really see it too clearly. It looks quite mossy, but you wouldn't necessarily see it until the light hits it.
Yes.
So that these hidden aspects And the UV is the biofluorescence. That's an actual thing that exists within nature. So there you go, really.
That's
That gives you a
amazing.
bit of overview.
Oh, that is absolutely fantastic. I feel like I've been on like a woodland walk. just looking at it all. It's absolutely stunning. You've done such a fantastic job, Murron, and I can just tell from your voice how passionate you are about the work that you're doing. And I mean, I'd love to know what you do when you get students who come to you in your community workshops and that. What are you trying to get them to do aside from find their creativity?
I think it's really important that when people come to a workshop that I do, that they can feel that the pace is just a bit slower. They're not there to kind of tick off boxes and get things done. They're there to just slow everything down and reconnect with their creativity through the process. And I think, especially when it's inspired by my own practice, for instance, I like to use that as a way in for people. That's why I like to kind of call them portals, because through that, I think you're starting to consider looking a bit closer at things and noticing stuff. And one of the key things really I want to do is spark glimmers, which are pocket-sized amounts of joy. And scientifically, they're proven over time when you accumulate all these little glimmers to have a positive impact on your well-being. So it's a very holistic approach. I would like people to feel I'm giving them permission to play, but at the same time walking away feeling like they've learned something new that they can carry on with, or they've experienced a really nice session where they felt inspired, or actually give them a skill building approach where they're learning and being creative, but at the same time at the end it has got some sort of transformative quality where they've actually grown in confidence or grown in skill set. So it really depends who I'm working with and how the session is delivered, depending on what that's for. But that's kind of my goal in a way, and not just kind of, I'm not very prescriptive. I don't like to say this is what you're making and this is what it should look like. I will show examples, I will show how to kind of achieve it, but it's really over to you to make it your own. Not so you think, oh gosh, I don't know what to do, but at the same time kind of feeling confident enough to know what to do, but not feeling like it has to look like a certain thing at the end, because I think sometimes that can be productive in a way. It puts people off when maybe they didn't expect it. They expected it to look like something, but maybe it doesn't. For me as well, like especially with the community art side of things, it's very much about the process. I think through process, you can learn so much and gain so much from that really the outcome is just that. It's just what you've made through that process, and the process is what you take with you. So I think that's really my approach and what I'm really passionate about, and giving people that space and time to slow down and reconnect, and especially looking at nature, because nature is not in a rush. Everything's in its own time when it's ready, and it reveals stuff at the right time as well. So moving into summer now, in the space of just a couple of weeks, like the garden is absolutely full, and there was nothing there a few weeks ago. And I think just slowing down with its rhythm of the seasonality can actually be really beneficial as well.
Oh, I wholeheartedly approve of what you just said. It's so, so true. Well, Murron, our time's running out, sadly, but I've really, really enjoyed having our chat. Thank you so much for taking me through your work and sharing a little window into the amazing creativity that you spend your time doing.
Oh, thank you so much, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. And I hope, it's given people a bit of inspiration to have that permission to play and take that moment to slow down, because it can be so magical and really, really amazing what it can achieve.
My thanks to Murron for speaking to me for Making Stitches podcast. You can see some of Murron's beautiful pieces which she talked me through during our conversation in the show notes for this episode at makingstitchespodcast.com. While you're there, you can also find links to Murron's website and newsletter, where you can find out all about her upcoming workshops and exhibitions, as well as her seasonal stitch circle and community. Thank you to you too for listening. That's all for this time, but I'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with more creative chat for you. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please share it with anyone else who you think might like to hear it too. And to make sure you don't miss out on the next episode when it arrives, make sure you're following Making Stitches podcast on social media and on your favourite podcast app. Until next time, thanks again for listening. Take care of yourself and enjoy your crafting.